Compared to previous records, what was the ratio to like live drums and loops?
Everything is live.
Right.
Every drum on the record is live.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and we work with this unbelievable drum producer called Mike Pelliconi, and he does these CDs which, you know, a lot of kids will know from sampling records, called drum drops. And you want to recreate a sound of a drum, he is the motherfucking man.
Right.
He's unbelievable. To the point that he did Lily Allen's first record, and Studio One tried to sue Lily Allen for one of the tracks because they thought it was a sample, but it wasn't. Wow. So he's the man. And Pablo, my music partner, is obsessed with drums, and this was like Pablo's little venture out but we ended up recording 30 different songs of drums, which meant there were probably 20 to 30 takes on each song. Man, I don't know if I ever can go through that mentally again. It was ridiculous. Yeah. But I think on the record it's come out well. I don't think we ever need to record a drum ever again, actually. I think we've got so much on our hard drive now that... But it was an amazing experience. And also we had this great jazz drummer, Graham, who... you know, he's just very precise, brilliant musician. And then we also worked with Josh from White Denim, who was more kind of crash bang. So we got this good little dynamic between the two drummers. But that was 10 days in the studio of just recording drums. So we had all these drums and all these ideas, but no songs. So it was literally it was like... Francis Ford Coppola, I always remember him talking about, you know, just going mad when he was doing Apocalypse Now, and you kind of just you've got all this stuff, but you don't know where it's going. But it wasn't negative, you know. It's been a really positive experience making this record. I mean, the dynamic between me and Pablo is the best dynamic I've ever had making a record.
We talked about the psychedelia on this, and a lot of American psychedelic influences, but I also feel the ghost of Syd Barrett sort of threaded through this record. Would that be a fair comment?
I mean, it's a very wonderful thing of you to say, and yeah, I mean, we were definitely, a lot of those type of influences were creeping into the record.
Because he was like no compromise, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just wanted to take something which was, you know, the love of all of our lives. Everything starts predominantly from beats. You know, that's the kind of the relationship between me and Pablo, where we started collecting records and coming from hip hop and electronic records. But I think we just, you know, we were listening to a lot of weird things like Turkish psychedelic records and Afro funk records, and really trying to just get a different influences, and also looking at a lot of krautrock.
Definitely,
and a lot of psychedelia, you know, from English, you know, 60s psychedelia through to, like I said, Turkish and Iranian. I mean, there's just such an amazing wealth of music out there in the world, and you forget that, you know, Russian funk, you know, there's, you know, because you sort of as a collector of music, you know, the idea of, when we were kids, you collect American music, and that was your references, and most of the records that were sampled would come from, you know, your second generation James Brown copies, and finding Funk 7s, etc. Then that sort of became, as well, you'd be looking at UK records, and slowly more like Parisian, you'd have like your Serge Gainsbourg kind of influences and that. And now, because that's all being exhausted, we're all looking at these weird Eastern European, you know, since the Eastern European bloc kind of came down, people have been able to go out there and find all these old records, and a lot of that influence is what we've kind of thrown in there. But it's very subtle, you know. But that's how we kind of
I was going to say, of course,
in the studio.
The beauty of this record is you've got like that going on, and the density of that, and the live performance, and the sounds, but overridingly is a great sense of melody. You say you recorded it in the summer, and that's probably why it's quite an up record.
Yeah, it's an up record. I think it's excuse me. It is. It's much more optimistic, I think. There's a lighter feel about it. I think there's a yin-yang relationship with me and Pablo. Pablo's a very upbeat person. I tend to be slightly more melancholic. And
that's a great dynamic.
Yeah, and I think this record really shines for that, actually. And also, I think when we started it, we both were consciously like, look, you know, I feel like the last 3 albums, and when we've done all our sort of end titles, etc. I don't consider those to be an album. We've got Science Fiction, Never Neverland, and War Stories, and they're like a kind of trilogy, and in many ways, are quite a negative trilogy as far as what was mentally going on at the time with each of those records. There was a lot of pain and a lot of aggression, just even in the creative process. There was also a lot of learning and inexperience, and there was a lot of beauty from that. But they were tough. They were tough relationship records to make. This record just felt, I also think you self-perpetuate that, and you kind of want to be like, it's rock and roll. We're going to go deep. It's all going to get, the drugs and the madness and all that. And I think with this record, we just want it to be like, look. We just want to just have a much more cerebral, spiritual experience making the record. I don't mean that to sound that in some kind of like Svengali way, but it's just the dynamic was just a lot more joyous making the record, and hopefully that comes out,
I think it does. And of course the new single is Natural Selection, featuring the Black Angels. You've got a great history of collaborations, people like Tom York and Ian Brown, Richard Ashcroft, amazing people, and some of those tunes were incredible, like Rabbit in Your Headlights would be a tune Radiohead would be happy to put on an album, I would think. And now we've got Natural Selection with the Black Angels. So tell us a little bit about how that came about, because it's another fabulous tune.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact it's kind of got this weird sort of 50s, 60s doo-wop feel about the vocal, and it's kind of a really poppy vocal.
It's actually quite an up vocal.
Yeah, it's great, and it's a love song.
I know. I was listening to his voice singing it and hearing some of their other material.
Yeah, and their other stuff's hard. It's pretty really hardcore.
Darker,
yeah. They gave us 2 tracks. One which was much more typical, kind of much heavier, and then they gave us this, and we sat there and we were like, "There's something really un-Unkle, but really Unkle about it." And it felt like that was kind of the beginning of the collaborations going, wow, we're going to make an upbeat record, and it's pop in the same way that I'm comparing, Beatles pop or whatever. That they're just it's not about being, what we see pop as now as kind of, Britney Spears or whatever. It's just got a really upbeat feel and a really quite traditional singer-song, pop way of writing. And I heard actually that they did an interview about it, and they were saying he was imagining what it was like to be married and be in love, because there's two main people in the band are kind of like, one's in a relationship and married, the other one isn't, and it was sort of his perspective of his partner being in this relationship, and it's just kind of, it was I think it's quite an interesting thing, but I love it. I think it's really, really
I'm going to
cool.
play the track, so we'll end the interview there, because probably this interview will go for 7 hours if we keep going, so hopefully I'll get a chance to have another chat to you at some stage.